in the chiropractic world, I take care of people on an office by office visit basis. And I am analyzing their physical body, their physical shell, to see where there may be interference, to get the pressure off the bones, to improve the nerve flow so that the brain can better communicate with the body. I believe that a human being is a spiritual being, first and foremost. We have an intellect, we have a mind, and for our purposes, I would say we have two minds. We have a critical thinking mind, and we have more of a habitual mind. And then under that, we have our physical shell bodies, which are limited in comparison to our intellect and the fact that we are spiritual beings. Now, I know it's a bit risky for me to talk about spiritual well-being in a chiropractic setting, and maybe that's why I have it as part of this booklet. But I think it's really important because we are spiritual beings, number one. And number two, in terms of efficiency, and that's what we really pride ourselves on, is giving very, very specific, well-timed, at the appropriate place, in the appropriate pre-vectored direction based on not only just your alignment, but your true geometrical shapes of the joint surfaces. With that same level of specificity, we want to take and pop the hood on our mental, emotional, and social well-being. And I feel that dealing with the spiritual is really the most efficient way of dealing with that. You know, I probably wouldn't be doing this type of talk if it wasn't for about a year ago. I had moved back here, of course, to my home state of Minnesota, and I really wanted to see people that I hadn't seen since high school, chiropractic college, long-lost relatives from the 1990s that I hadn't seen since the mid-90s. And I did get that chance. All within a 34-day stretch, I got to see hundreds of people I haven't seen in well over 2 decades. And it was incredible. But it was also very, very sad because those meetings over 34 days actually came by way of 3 consecutive funerals, all for young men. One was a 47-year-old chiropractic friend and mentor type. He was very, very, very charismatic, but you know, he had despair. Sadly, he had despair, and I didn't know that he had a rough upbringing, and so that's what happened there. And then less than 2 weeks after, this young man that I had grown up with across the street, we used to sit in the back of the bus on the way to and from school and do impersonations of different teachers and Hollywood, Wayne and Garth, you know, Wayne's World and that sort of thing. And you know, less than 2 weeks after that was my second cousin, and I had no idea that he had a problem with drugs. And so there was joy, though, even in the tears, in how people could, you know, support each other and tell stories and, you know, really focus on love, because love is really the only thing that lasts. And that's why chiropractic is great, is because, you know, can you express love better when you can bend down and get on the level of your grandkids? Can you express love better and accept love better and think of creating heaven on earth sorts of conditions when you're golfing with your friends, having coming off just triple or quadruple bogeying the last hole, but not getting all riled up and in a bad mood and still being able to, yes, keep on keeping score, yet at the same time be level-headed enough to enjoy, truly enjoy that time with your friends? Or how about when you get a good night's rest without having to take sleeping pills so that you can wake up without your alarm clock and feel great to have enough energy to do what you've been called to do for that day? You can clearly see that at these funerals, you know, 2 of them would have been a coincidence, but 3 was a pattern. And the meaning that I took from that is, yes, go ahead and enter into that with your patients, because there could be somebody that really, really needs to hear this information, because we're all in that line somewhere of despair and hope. My godfather, sadly, he went missing and his life ended in despair just a couple of weeks and a month after he said the most uplifting thing for me. I called him from the hospital. Our daughter was just born with special needs, and I was looking for some consolation, and it was the first time he ever mentioned God. This is just back in 2018. He said, "Jim, if God saw fit to bring a child like this to you and Kim, then he must think that you're pretty special parents." I thought that he was making progress in his alcohol treatment, but sadly, just like my friend Sean, who's 47, the first of those 3 funerals, he apparently knew despair too well. But you can't give what you don't have. And his widow told me at the funeral that he was proud that I had called him, but nevertheless, he already felt like his life was kind of spinning down the drain. But as it ended, again, you can't give what you don't have. He had hope. And as it went down, I can't help but think that perhaps he gave me the last bit of hope that he had left. And it's because of that, I don't feel guilty, but I do feel somewhat burdened or compelled to go into this layer of above, down, inside out with people, because he could express love, it seemed like, on the surface, and he could accept it, and he had so many stories to tell, and he was full of life. But like they said at Sean's funeral, perhaps the only person he didn't love was himself. And so identity is a big, big, big thing that I really want my family members to know, that we don't get our identity from the culture. When I was 17 years old, my parents lived in California. I went at Blaine High School because I wanted to stay back. I thought we could have a chance to win a state championship in football. You couldn't even see what color the wall was in my bedroom because I had sports posters everywhere. I found my identity in sports. My brother had just broken his neck. He had this halo on. It was the 4th of July. It was a sentimental time, and I missed my parents. And my godfather could see that I was bumming, that I was sad. He comes over, he puts his hand on my shoulder like this. He says, "You're going to get through this." And I said, "How do you know that?" He says, "Because you're Jim Petrick." And I said, "Who's Jim Petrick?" And he said, "You love sports." And it was a bizarre thing for him to say, but again, he was right, because I did find my identity in sports. We want to focus on where James says, everybody, if any of you, not just people who believe in this certain faith, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who generously gives to all without finding fault. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. He or she is a double-minded man, unstable in all he or she does. So the wisdom that comes from humility, which comes from your identity, which comes from understanding your position to the creator or the great designer, let's just say, if we're not connected to that, I don't know how we can be connected to ourselves, because we didn't make ourselves. And I don't know how you can deliver an authentic message to, in my case, family members that have been left in the wake of just really trying to find answers to unanswerable questions. The key to ongoing or infinite wisdom is humility. Because look at examples in the real world, or even Solomon, who wrote Ecclesiastes and Proverbs and these wisdom books of the Old Testament. He got proud, he got puffed up with wisdom, and he ended up with 1,000 concubines and wives. Not a wise decision. So apparently he got arrogant. If he had the humility on the one end, see, sandwich these first 8 verses of the book of James, I think they're the wisest words written in history. That's why I call them the solids. You got verse 1 talking about identity, emotional balance, mental balance, and social connection, in that order, being connected to the creator. And then that gives you a perspective of yourself, which gives you a sense of identity, which has everything to do with mental and emotional well-being. But then from that is your audience, or who you are connecting to. So you see the priority there. So let's go back now, and we're going to connect some dots. So what we now need to do is to back up, and in order to give our above-down, inside-out diagram sense and context, we need to start at how that was actually formed. And then we can understand one of the bridging concepts, a cool 2-word phrase that helps us to bridge from the physical to the mental, emotional, and social, and to the spiritual in a very non-confusing, very sort of linear fashion. So there's this concept called functional integration. I was on this YouTube video, and Dr. Stephen Meyer, who's been featured on Joe Rogan's podcast, was talking about how software engineers are helping cellular biologists understand the phenomena that they're observing with DNA transcription and replication, so basically the multiplying of cells. And one of the terms he used was functional integration. Functional integration means that a section or a region of the hardware is not defined by its geographical parts. In our context, the parts of the brain are not defined by the anatomical parts, but rather by the region, this part of the computer, let's say, is defined by when one part of that region seems to get stimulated or integrated or activated, several other associative functions turn on simultaneously. That's what functional integration is. And it's no more complex than if you know how a light switch can turn on 1, 2, 3, 4, or an entire stadium full of lights, depending how the electrician set that up in the first place. And I bounced this idea off my cousin Nick, who is an incredible polka musician, but he's also an electrical engineer, and he says that this absolutely fits. In our example of functional integration, or bringing the Newtonian to the quantum, or the anatomical to the physiological, is the straight leg raise test that says after a person gets adjusted, usually their leg is going to raise up as well as the other. This gives us a functional basis. A function dictates structure, as opposed to the classical chiropractic saying of structure dictates function. We have a model now of the function of the upper brainstem dictates the structure of the lower back, since the sidemost part of the brainstem controls the tone of the muscles that anchor into the lower back. And if we can see a change in the range of motion all the way down in the hips area by a result of only dealing right here, that's a heck of a lot more interesting than putting a person down on their side and manipulating their lower back in a high velocity sort of a way like that, which, based on this study from 1998, verifies this test that I've been doing and validates this test that I've been doing in my office for several years, which I learned about via a friend, an old grizzled pro, a white-haired, but at least he has hair, friend who said, try this on your patients. And I did. And when that happened the first time, and this patient asked me, she said, is it possible that getting adjusted here can actually make me adapt to handle stress better, to be less argumentative, because I noticed that I'm less irritable around my family members. And I grabbed this chart, this anatomical chart, and just like Candace Pert from Molecules of Emotion had talked about the limbic system being like a series of nodes, nodal points, or one area of transmission linkage to the next, just like you might see at a bus stop or at a train terminal, seeing where the different maps and the different courses are over the course of the day. I saw that sort of prong and connection points, these nodal points in the shape of a USB drive, like a USB icon in your car, but actually with 4 prongs. And the 2 prongs down here are brainstem, cerebellum, which is the integrative center of the brain, and these 4 key areas. So that really animated and brought my chart alive. It's like seeing Michelangelo's creation of Adam with the fingertips touching. But what's more than that is it also gave not just an anatomical explanation for the phenomena that I was observing in just regular clinical practice, but it also gave a sort of quantum or movement of particle sort of explanation for it as well. And what I mean by that is I'm looking out at a forest right now, and there could be a path. I can't see a path because a person hadn't walked through the forest right there 100 or 1,000 times yet. Well, it's the same thing with this part of our brain. Did you know that when you were born, you didn't have wrinkles in your brain? You didn't have these anatomical parts of your brain formed yet either, because neurons, nerve cells that fire together eventually become wired together. See that? By means of functional integration, when one area fires, the others tend to fire, and that's why our testimonials show not only do I not have the pain anymore, but I'm more easy to get along with at the workplace. I'm not having to take as much caffeine. I'm moving better. I'm more flexible. I'm handling stress better. These sorts of things that tend to happen from adjusting the spine. But now the benefit that we've shown we're dealing in the Newtonian and in the quantum world, we can now use physics to create a diagram and make some predictions. We're taking a design pattern that was just discovered, not invented, but kind of discovered. And this design pattern's all over in nature. It's like a tree, above the surface, below the surface. It's the basic shape of a nerve cell. It's what nerve cells do with other nerve cells in your brain when you're learning something and when you're thinking creatively. So now, because of functional integration, we now have a sort of practical, common sense way now of peeling away the various layers to get to the most powerful layer of above, down, inside, out. Now, before we move into more depth of the second layer of above, down, inside, out, which is your critical thinking mind having better autonomy over your habitual mind and your body, we want to remind ourselves that this is not intellectual stuff, right? This is intuitive. This is not mystical. This is math. This is not academic. This is about application. And it's not by chance, it's by design. And the way I see it is it's your chance to really design a new, better, and more compelling future. Because when you understand that your health is not just a state to arrive at and plant your flag, but it's truly, truly, truly the most valuable resource that you have for carrying out your marching orders in life in the time that you have remaining, then you can see how it's that much more important. And you can see how a simple spinal adjustment can have such a ripple effect, and why it's so rewarding for me to see you on a regular office visit. I might, from now on, when you come in to see me, I might simply ask you, how's your trajectory, right? How well are you trending upward and to the right in all areas of your life? Yeah, with your spine. If you want to tell me, yeah, I got some tension right here. If you want to answer the question that way, fine. If you want to answer the question, I just realized that this one thing happened, but it was not just a roadblock, but it truly was a stepping stone that got me to where I am right now. Because if I didn't learn that, I probably wouldn't have this perspective, right? We can change the meaning of past events by simply asking the question of, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this way about that event? What does it mean, and what should I do about it? In other words, and back in 2017, before this unfortunate stuff happened in 2018, I'm glad that I had resolved to make my journaling time, this is a fairly new one, but to make my journaling time structured in a way that helps me to connect my dots, that I can use. It wouldn't just be a memorial to aha moments or a graveyard where good ideas go to die, but truly through a method of capturing journal-worthy entries and then being able to scan, just like SEO, by asking a certain question, able to go back through and connect the relevant dots. Remember that if you ask God for wisdom, God give me wisdom, you're doing it wrong. You have to bring something to the table. Even if it's the acknowledgement that, God, I'm so perplexed that I don't even know where to start. That's bringing something to the table, because that's an admission of humility, right? Which means that you are now receptive for receiving wisdom, because that's like at the opposite pole to make this whole thing work. And we know that the setbacks are an opportunity to get back on track. We're going down, we sense it, and that's a humbling thing, and we desire wisdom, and whoop, we get right back on track. That is what I would like to see growth look like for each and every one of us. Steve Jobs said, we don't connect our dots by looking to the future, we connect them by looking at the past and piecing them together. And I hope that you can see, after connecting your dots, a constellation, a guiding light that maybe wasn't there or was not shining as brightly as before. Now, it's really amazing to me that our most formative years of life, we don't even have any memory of. Think about it. The people who care most about us, they did a good job, our parents love us, and whoever we're getting our messaging from, the media, definitely the culture, and it just kind of locked in there before we even had a critical thinking mind to decide if, well, do I really want to believe these things? Do I really want to do things this way? And they kind of become part of our software system, our software system, our mainframe, our operating system. And sometimes we need to give thought to those programs, right? Think about how much willpower just went into getting you to the point that you can use the bathroom all on your own without even thinking about it. That caused a lot of willpower in planning from your parents at some point. But on the more mundane level, think about all the other hundreds of decisions that you make throughout the course of the day. The more we can eliminate decision and have the good things that we know we should do for ourselves anyways on better autopilot, because we've cultivated the personal leverage to be able to do that, because we have incorporated the emotional component with our to-do list for the day. Let's just say that it's Friday, for example, and I'm supposed to work out. If I wake up and I think to myself, do I want to work out today? Guess what? I'm probably not going to do it, because I had to make that decision. But if I do that, okay, it's Friday, it's workout day, I gotta do this, I gotta have this pair of shoes, I gotta bring this, I gotta have hangers, and I gotta bring this extra stuff, right? If I went into that mode right away, I'm more likely to actually do that workout, because I've figured out sort of algorithmically, if this, then that, the cascade of piecing things through the course of the day in a way that works and is most efficient for me to get little wins along the way, just like a little kid. Mommy, look at me, I'm in the deep end now I'm taking my floaties off. Adults need that sense of momentum as well. And the better we can conceptualize that, the better we can overcome some faulty programming that our well-meaning parents may have accidentally passed on to us. And not only that, when you get into the field of epigenetics, which is very popular now, epigenetics basically means that you can change your genetic expression multiple times throughout your life. Genes are not curses, but they are predispositions. And then based on the thoughts and the attitudes and the environments that we choose as human beings with critical thinking minds that should be sovereign, the hippocampus over the hypothalamus and the amygdala, then the rest of the body, the vestibular nucleus, carried out in our movements and our alignment and how we motor around in this physical universe. The better we've pieced together those concepts, the more likely we are going to eliminate decision and then therefore free up our mind to things that are more important. My son, I didn't draw this out for him, but I certainly thought of answering it in this fashion. He asked me, Dad, is anyone going to remember me in 100 years after I'm gone? And I said, I don't think your ghost is going to come back and say, do you know who Brooks Petrick was? Do you know who Brooks Petrick was? Do you know who Brooks Petrick was? So it's kind of funny, but I saw his point. It's kind of sad in a way. What actually lasts? And I said to him, Brooks, did I tell you one of the last things that my dad said to me? And so I told him about it. He said to me, I'm not going to see Brooks's first game. I'm not going to see Anthony score his first goal. But it doesn't really matter if they win or lose. I just hope the intention lines up with the result. So on my way back to San Diego, I had this napkin on the plane, and what I had pieced together was that if you score a goal, but you don't win, your goal doesn't matter. If you win the game, but you don't win the championship, your win doesn't matter. If you win the championship, no one's really going to care in a couple years anyways, or remember. Therefore, what is the only thing that actually lasts? The only thing that lasts is love, right? And so what I explained to him, and again, I didn't write this out with the dots, but I guess because of the framework that was on my mind, it was perfect. And we're trying to do Occam's razor here. We're trying to give the simplest explanation to the most complex things so that we can be better empowered, so that we can construct a better ideal and then feel like we're being pulled more than we're pushing. I said to him, God is love. And part of his expression of love is connection. And he made us to express love and to receive love. We're made in his image. And we are to have eternity in mind and connect with others and bloom where we're planted so that we can create fruit and heaven on earth conditions. That's what life is all about. And of course, we want to be well rooted in the truth. What we're aspiring to is that person who is like a tree planted by streams of water, and that's why we named our son Brooks, or Brooks of Living Water. Our daughter's name is Liv. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither, and whatever they do prospers. It's important to equip ourselves with this information, because if you want to overcome genetic predispositions, you need to armor yourself with truth. Now here's the truth about epigenetics. Sadly, the first study done in epigenetics was something called the Dutch Hunger Winter, where the Nazis pushed the Dutch people off of their land in the middle of winter, and it was found that moms who were pregnant, those babies, the stress hormones pass right over the placenta into the baby. And these adults and babies and kids grew up to have a lot of lifestyle issues, very high stressed out people, heart diseases, early cancers, self-defeating personality disorders and compulsions and so forth. They did not have that cascade of dopamine and the hormones being released by the hypothalamus, creating the reward mechanism, the reward cascade that is unique to vertebrates. They didn't have that very well intact. Yes, there could have been some genetic things because of the chemistry being passed across by mom, but also their emotions and their environment, two things that you do have power over, two things that you do have control over, and therefore, as our parents may have told us entering into middle school, choose your friends wisely. Now, I'm confident you can watch 5 hours of epigenetics information on YouTube videos out there, but this model right here will suffice your understanding of how to put epigenetics to work for you. Not only does our chiropractic method alone tend to help people think better, have better sleep, better energy, adapt to stress better, and have better posture and mobility, it also helps to prevent bad things from happening. I don't know of anything else out there that, without taking something out of a person or putting something into them, can have that fourfold impact on a person's health. And so not only is chiropractic standalone awesome, but it's also awesome because it makes everything else that we do better. If you're stressed out and you do meditation and you do quiet time and you do meditation and other peace building kind of strategies, if your spine is on your nerves, guess what? Other people and other things are still going to be on your nerves. You want to breathe deeply from your belly, but it's difficult to do that if you have a spinal problem, which causes you to have to deal with your breathing through your chest and your neck more because maybe you're in such acute pain that you can't even relax enough to breathe with your belly. Or what about drinking plenty of water? That's great, but if you don't have good flexibility in your spine, thanks to good alignment, then you're not going to be able to absorb the water into the discs of your spine anyways, and therefore you could still have premature arthritis if your spine's not well adjusted. Step number 4 of the 7 keys. You want to be more alive than dead, then eat foods that are more alive than dead. But understand that you are not what you eat. You are what your body can use. And considering the vagus nerves that exit up here go down and regulate the acid levels in your stomach, determining ultimately how well you absorb the food that you get, and that nerve travels down to every major organ of your body up to the first part of your large intestine, the implications are huge. You aren't what you eat. You are what your body can use. Dynamic movement and rest. It's difficult to have enough energy to exercise during the day if you're not sleeping deeply, and it's difficult to get into deep sleep, delta wave sleep, if your hypothalamus is not secreting growth hormone in the middle of the night, which you need to offset the effects of gravity and being upright and vertical. That's why we got to get horizontal for several hours at a time, and it's this growth hormone that ushers in deep sleep, which is benefited directly and absolutely through our adjustments that are given here. And last but not least, you want to work out. Great, well, a car that drives around the block a bunch of times is not going to fix its own alignment unless the alignment is corrected by that mechanic first. So let's make sure that your spine is balanced so that you can get the most out of your workouts. So the 2 words that we want to be keenly aware of, which weave through the 3 layers of above, down, inside out, are resilience and integration. So we talked about functional integration, and to that point, whenever you see an integrative wellness center, they usually mean that there's several practitioners under one roof trying to give you the feeling of integration. There's an acupuncturist, there's a chiropractor, maybe there's a medical doctor, a massage therapist, trying to give you the feeling of integration and giving a well-rounded, multifaceted service. But integration is actually, according to the definition, an inside job. It's an above, down, inside out phenomenon based on the definition of integration. And the other one is resilience. With my own spine and dealing with my own scoliosis, which you can see is better over a half of a lifetime later for me, I had to face fact that the spine is not a column. That's part of what put me on this trajectory of adjusting the spine the way that I do and the success that I've had as a patient. So I'm not just telling you to do this stuff. I'm actually receiving it myself because I understood firsthand that the spine is not a column. You teach it that way in school, but when my spine was getting worse in chiropractic college, and I was at 46 degrees, potentially facing to have to get rods all the way down my spine. I was verging on tears, and I walk up to this plastic model in my bedroom, down off of 82nd Street and Penn Avenue in Bloomington, right by the next right by the chiropractic college, and I say, what in the world is wrong with my spinal? And I could not say column, because I realized over time that the spine is a tensegral structure. It's tension-based. It's like a suspensory bridge. And anything that dissipates tension throughout the system, like a suspensory bridge, to prevent it from breaking down on the struts and the attachment points in any one given part, when it goes out of proper alignment, it actually unravels instead of going out like a stack of Jenga blocks. And when the spine unravels, it actually unravels from the top, because up here is structurally the weakest link. Think about it, you got all this mobility up here, but with extra mobility, there's less stability, which given the weight of the 13-pound bowling ball head sitting on top of everything, makes the margin of error way, 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 way less. And therefore, though, when this problem gets corrected, the hourglass effect of putting our eggs into that one basket and the potential wide, broad effects and benefits of that are not something so subtle, but in fact are profound for very, very many people. And so I want to ask you, who do you know that is taking multiple pain medications? Who do you know that has been to different doctors and has been prescribed this treatment for that problem, and they just seem to be chasing the effects? Maybe someone that even has some mental emotional health issues, and they've been told that the problem is in their head, or here, take this chemical and substitute for that chemical, which they probably won't be very compliant on, because inside they know that they're taking that one chemical as a compensation because they're somehow disconnected, maybe in the first and second layer of above, down, inside out, because they've had some concussions from sports injuries, and it's thrown their emotions out of whack. Maybe they're not thinking straight. Maybe they had some bad spiritual advice at some moment. You know, when I was young enough to sit next to my dad, and I asked him, I said, what's heaven and hell like? And how do I know where I'm going? He says, look at the ceiling, Jim. He says, every time you mess up, the ceiling gets a little bit darker. And if you run out of white spots on the ceiling, then that's it. And that threw me into a doom loop of just, it goofed me up in the head. It made me emotionally insecure. I had physical symptoms. I knew that my heart rate, this would absolutely be diagnosed as obsessive compulsive disorder. Checking the locks, checking my equipment, checking over my assignments multiple times a day to make sure I didn't mess up, and asking my parents multiple times, is it gonna be all right? Is it gonna be all right? Is it gonna be all right? All because of this fear that God could pull out the trap door on me at any given moment. My dad didn't mention anything about God's mercy or forgiveness, and so I lived in fear like this unnecessarily for years. And so people can be subluxated or have their fuse blown in any one of these layers of above, down, inside out, and you can see how one absolutely spills into and affects the other on a bigger picture, on a bigger scale. So what do we get though when we combine resilience and integration? Well, what I think we get is an emotion called joy. Joy is the most sustainable of emotions. It's way more sustainable than happiness because it doesn't require as much of a dopamine rush. And it's also the most resourceful. It helps us to take setbacks and to see them as being stepping stones in ways to improve our perseverance and our patience, and work closer to that ideal, that invisible, intangible, yet undeniable thing that makes life meaningful. And so James says, count it all joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance or patience, depending on the interpretation, depending on the translation. Let patience or perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. So when you combine resilience and integration, you get joy, because the other definition of resilience isn't to bring something back to normal after being bent, stretched, or compressed, as I see in the spine all the time, but to actually overcome adversity. So overcoming adversity through reverse engineering along the frameworks that we're talking about is really the key to changing the meaning of past events so that we can learn. We don't have to repeat these Groundhog Days, and we can have a breakthrough and we can move on. I like to think that God is patient, and this is a good thing because we can have a chance to get it right and improve every day, but it's also a bad thing because I believe that He's perfectly patient and just sitting back and letting us relearn until we actually get it, and we don't just hear it only, we actually do it and we act on truth instead of just being a mere hearer of truth. And if all this seems like a bunch of baloney, that's fine. But please, please, please don't ask the culture to confirm your identity, because it just may tell you that you are something you are not. I've been fascinated for some time with the concept that one thing plus another thing can equal a whole lot of things. When I was putting this information together, I came across this quote by Benoit Mandelbrot, a late mathematician. He said, "Bottomless wonders come from simple rules repeated without end." And I clicked on the little video underneath, and lo and behold, it was a striking shape We see a very similar pattern linking a fixed number with a variable or an imaginary number, such as -3 or -4. That's not a real number. You can't hold -4 in your hand. You can't hold the number 4 in your hand either, so it's completely conceptual. But just like 2 + 2 = 4 at the beginning of the world, before a calculator said so or before a math teacher ever said so, we're dealing with mathematical calculations. And the great thing with math, infinite numbers like pi, like when you calculate the circumference or radius of a circle, remember that number 3.14 or something 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 that goes on forever. These infinite numbers leave a very interesting plot when you map it out on graph paper.
This simple equation makes a very interesting shape when you graph it in the complex plane, and this is called the Mandelbrot set. But people have analyzed this shape and have found some very scary things about it. What's amazing about the Mandelbrot set is that you can zoom in infinitely and you'll keep finding new things. Over here you can keep finding more and more copies of the Mandelbrot set no matter how far you zoom in. You could even zoom in really close to something like this, and it takes a while, but look, there's another little baby Mandelbrot set. Alternatively, you could go into this region and find completely different things. On the left side of this thing, you'll find these weird elephant-shaped things that have spirals that go on forever, and you could even zoom into the side of one of the spirals and find new spirals that repeat infinitely and keep generating new infinite patterns like this. Or you could go on the other side of the elephants and find these weird seahorse-shaped things that have different kinds of spirals that are connected to each other, and once again, they keep going on forever. You can zoom in infinitely, and you'll keep finding new patterns, but like I said, it's a different type of pattern. Seriously, anytime you explore the Mandelbrot set, you can find brand new things, possibly things that no human has ever seen before, because like I said, there is infinite complexity and infinite information in this one shape.
I'm trying to figure out if there's a pattern to the numbers that belong to the Mandelbrot set. And it turns out there is. And the pattern looks like this. On the left side over there, you got this kind of spike that goes out. And you see there's this little bump on the end of the spike. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. So we'll zoom in on it. And that little bump, turns out, it looks like the entire Mandelbrot set. And it's almost identical to the parent, except it's got extra spikes growing off of it. But the basic shape's the same. There's an infinite number of baby versions built into the Mandelbrot set on smaller and smaller scales. And it doesn't lose complexity, it actually gains it each time you get more extra spikes growing off of it. So I'm going to suggest to you that this shape tells us something about the way God thinks. God's understanding is infinite. Numbers are an aspect of God's mind. God is responsible for numbers. When we explore and study numbers, we find intelligence. And not only intelligence, but infinite intelligence, because this thing repeats infinitely.
So the main thing that we said that was fixed in life is trials. Without trials, we don't grow. So we must persevere, we must count trials joy, we have to be a trial embracer, because the only alternative is being a victim or a trial denier. So we have to be an embracer. So when the trials happen and we embrace them, and we desire wisdom, and we bring singleness of mind when we desire and we ask God for wisdom according to the way that He has laid out, you can see that when you do that, you are most effectively, most efficiently dealing in the mental and emotional and social realm of your health. You're expanding that, and you are, by association, getting more life out of your years. So to summarize, the wheelhouse of our spiritual health unfoldment starts with joy and trials, the leaning in to trials because we know that it tests our faith, and that's really the only way to move towards improvement and perfection. And to even see the downslopes, the downturns, as opportunities to really call on being humble, because we're already trending downward in this case, and seeking wisdom, and that's what puts us back on towards the proper trajectory. We want to integrate our mind through better connecting our dots by stoking our creativity, and journaling is a great way. It's not the only way, but it is a great way to develop a constellation out of the dots that you have connected. There's somebody that you know right now who is looking for answers to their health challenges. Maybe they're taking several medications and they're experiencing side effects, and they're wondering if their side effects are worse than their original problem. They've been to maybe integrative health centers, they've seen a lot of different practitioners seeking the feeling of integration or the feeling of connection, without really giving consideration to the fact that integration is really an inside job, and perhaps they have all the proper wiring and messaging, but that their signals just got crossed and they may have a structural problem in their spine. Maybe someone who's looking for hope. Maybe someone that's had multiple brain injuries and concussions to the point that they feel sort of disassociated or disconnected even from themselves, and they're kind of scared. They might have some personality issues, they may have some addictive tendencies, and they're looking for hope. And they know there's answers. They know they don't want to just have an outside-in approach. They want to truly, truly get better and to get to the cause of their health problems and not just keep on treating the effects. Somebody who's in pain, and we know that pain is an emotional experience, and they feel out of touch. It's affecting their work life, their social life, their home life, maybe even their sense of identity and their ability to be a good dad, a good spouse. If you know anybody like that, or 100 of them, please send them in. We want to help as many people as we possibly can with our unique approach to health and well-being. Think of how cool that is. You can save somebody else's life without risking your own. Now that might sound pretty intense, but I really pieced much of this together by reverse engineering what I would have told my godfather if I had one more chance. And so life-saving, very much so in all three of these layers, is top of mind. And I back that up by the greatest chiropractic story ever told. This goes into the genre of things that happen to you instead of things that you go out there and you try to make happen by sheer grit and willpower. Because there's no way that I could have designed this. February 7th, 2005, my first day in private practice in San Diego, right across the street from the Miramar Marine Corps Air Station in San Diego. And this patient named Frederick, this Marine, comes hobbling in from across the street, and he is about to deploy to Iraq, but he can't. He couldn't pass his physical. He wanted to go to Iraq. He didn't want to fail his physical. He didn't want to go the military route, which I still think is medication, then needle injection, then MRI, then possible medical discharge or some other action. He didn't want to go through that circus. He wanted to pay me out of pocket, goes to the chiropractor right across the street. Long story short, he comes hobbling in, and then within a week and a half or so, he's one of these cases that just responded very, very well. He had thrown out his lower back. I didn't even touch his lower back. I only touched his neck. He had thrown out his lower back wrestling some teenagers because he was volunteering at wrestling class for the local high school. But he had really good progress within a week and a half, and next thing you know, he's canceling his appointments because he's about to deploy. Well, a year and a half later, I hear this knock. We were on a storefront, there was glass out there, and I was kind of annoyed. We weren't even open yet. I grabbed my keys, I open it, and he says, "Mr. Petrick." Talked to me in this, I think he's from Virginia accent, and he addressed me like I was a drill sergeant. And so I knew it was him right away, because even though he had a mustache and his hair was longer, I was fixated on the two objects that he gave to me, which were an American flag he said he flew for me in Iraq, and this poem. And he says, it's in its original frame, he said, "I just wanted you to know that if it wasn't for your adjustments, then I couldn't have deployed to Iraq and found all those bombs with my dogs over the past year and a half, with my canine unit. So here's a flag I flew for you, and here's a copy of a poem that I wrote. Thanks." And then he pretty much left, and for all I know, he deployed again. But I tell that story because of what is included in this poem. Keep in mind, when he came to me, he was in adaptation mode. He was not thinking creatively. He wasn't thinking about trending upward and to the right. But once he had a connected mind, because his spine was off his nerves and his brain was better connected to his body in the physical sense, and he got deployed, he eventually had the presence of mind to step away from combat, to connect his dots, to think on what he was thankful for. And what does he write in this poem? It's not a Dr. Seuss rhymey kind of a poem. He says, "As I sit here with my 9mm by my side, I begin to wonder why I'm here, as my dog is running off going crazy from the mortars. To save an oppressed people from a depressed country? No, I'm here, and I do this for my friends, for my family, for my God, and for my country. For that I would kill, and for that I would die. Semper Fi, God bless those who helped me through this most challenging time of my life. Without you, I would have nobody. Without you, I would be nobody. Frederick K." Was he firing all 4 cylinders physically? He wouldn't have been able to be there. He wouldn't have been able to deploy if he didn't pass his physical. Was he using his critical thinking mind, yet also in enough trust mode to call on his habitual mind and his spiritual part that makes him human, to call on that and to see the big picture of why he's there, to keep on fighting, even in the midst of combat? Was he connected mentally and emotionally and socially to spiritually? He mentions all of these things. That's why it's the greatest chiropractic story. Now, you're probably not going to be asked to lay your life on the line in service of your country, but you do have marching orders, and you are in the middle of a story. I don't know what chapter you're on, and only you can connect your dots. but we are here to help you every layer of the way. Thank you for watching. This is Prior Lake Spinal Care. We're talking about the 3 layers of above, down, inside, out. Get connected, stay connected, and help others to do the same.